Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and we are painting a gorgeous tropical sunset today. Beautiful, beautiful. Super fun. We're transitioning into colors, and I use two brushes for this, a round 6 and a round 2. Now, if you have larger brushes, for example, I'll show you, I'm gonna use the 1-inch wash for this, or like a larger round. This is the perfect project to play with that on because we are doing a large sky. So larger brushes just make it easier to fill in larger spaces faster. So but don't worry, I did paint this with the 6 and a 2, so if this is what you have, you're great, you're set. You have all you need. We are using 5 colors today. So the first color we are using is pink. Right there. Isn't it pretty?
It's so pretty.
Next color we are using is amethyst. The next color we are using is tiger orange. And also some deep yellow. And our very last color is black. Right there. So those are our 5 colors. Okay, and we just have 4 steps to this project. So the very first step, we are going to put in the sky. Now this is probably going to be the part that's going to take the longest because we have some color transitioning. But that's okay, we can do it together. You guys can do this. Step number 2, we are going to put in the horizon, which is like kind of defining this horizon line right here. Step 3, we are going to do the water and the clouds. And step 4 is we are putting in our little palm tree corner and our little island or landscape right in that foreground. So those are our 4 steps. And I think we're ready to do this.
We're 100% ready.
Okay, now because this project is a landscape project and we are using the entire paper, I'm going to tape mine down. And that will help it so when I'm painting it won't warp. And then if you want it to kind of dry more flat, then you do not untape it until it's totally dry. Now, because this paper is not totally 100% cotton, even though it's 140 pound, it will start to kind of warp if you have a lot of water on the paper. So that's why I'm taping mine down. You could also use heavier weight papers that are 100% cotton, like Arches, or I think there's one called like Stonehenge that's really great. There's pads that come on a block, which means they're already glued down on the sides. Those are great to use, but that's why I'm taping mine. Okay?
I like it.
Great, let's get started. So, how we want our color to transition here, and you can see it in your reference photo, is we are gonna start off with the amethyst color, and then it's gonna transition into pink, and then light pink, and then kind of like an orangey, because we're gonna mix that yellow and the pink together. So it's gonna be like that pink yellow mixture, and then pure yellow, and then the tiger orange. So that's going to be how we're going to try and transition those colors. Now, I'm going to try and paint this fairly quickly because when you're painting colors that transition, you want a smooth transition, which means you do not want to give it time to dry. You want to try and do it all while it's wet, and then that way the colors will automatically blend together smoothly. So I'm just going to like go for it. But if you want to practice on like a sheet on the side a little bit, because to get used to it, that might be a good idea, because when you are painting your actual one, you want to do it quick. Great?
Great.
Great. Okay. So, like I said, you can use whatever brushes you have, but this is where a larger one would come in handy because you can cover a large amount of space at one time. So I'm going to just demonstrate how to use a wash in case you have one of those. And I am just going to start with picking up some water. And then the other thing I want you to keep in mind that I'm going to tell you now so I don't have to stop is on this left-hand side, you'll notice here that it's darker on the right-hand side and lighter on the left-hand side. And that is because if the sun is over here, usually wherever the sun is, it's brighter. And then the color changes as the sky gets farther away from the sun. And simultaneously, this is also where our trees are going to go. So we kind of want to leave this side a little bit softer. If that doesn't happen in your painting, don't stress about it. It's not a big deal, but I'm just showing you what I did. Okay, so I'm starting with water, And I'm going to put water down first. I'm just going back and forth, putting down water, kind of like a light wash. And then I'm going to grab my amethyst and just put it in at the top. Okay, and it's starting to blend. Now I'm getting rid of the excess paint on my brush, and then I'm going to I'm going to move this purple down the paper. And then now I'm going to introduce the pink. I'm still working fairly quickly. I don't want this to dry, and I'm going to start putting some pink in there. And immediately you want to work it back and forth, because you do not, even wherever you lay the pink, you don't want those brush marks to stay. And then I'm going to put more pink in there. And then now it's time to add some water to the bottom part, because I didn't put water there yet. Trying to blend out this line. You just kind of work it back and forth with the damp brush. And then as I'm getting to the left here, I'm not going to really worry. See how there's dark pink here? I'm not going to try and put that over there too much, because we want it to be lighter on that side. But I will probably introduce some pink right up here, so that's a smoother transition. I'm going to do another layer of purple right at that top, because I want that to be dark. And sometimes when you blend out, it loses that initial dark that you had. So I'll put it back in while it's still damp and then blend that out. And you can see my paper is already kind of starting to warp. And that's okay. I have it taped down. It'll be fine. Okay, so I have my purple to pink transition. And now what I'm going to do, and this is what I want you to keep in mind, is I'm going to start working on the pink to yellow transition. However, because we have purple here at the top, when I start to put this in, I'm no longer going to go all the way back to the top in that purple part, because if I do, my yellow and my purple are going to mix and they're going to become a muddy color, and it's going to get rid of all of this bright color that we have. So from now on, once you put in your purple to pink transition, you're almost going to like think of it as like, okay, no longer is my yellow going to go up past over here. Does that make sense?
It makes really good sense, actually.
Okay.
So I think you mentioned that in last week's tutorial.
Yeah, the jellyfish tutorial, we talked about how colors that are across from each other on the color wheel, or complementary colors, when you mix them together, they get muddy, and purple and yellow are complementary colors. So I'm going to just kind of be aware of that. And I'm going to start again with my water here. Now there's a pretty hard line from like this dark pink to this light pink, so I'm going to try and go in and just kind of see if I can blend that out so it's a smoother transition. And now I'm getting into my light pink. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of this deep yellow and a tiny bit of pink. I'm going to mix it on my palette. I want it to be a little bit more pink than yellow, because we're coming from pink. And I'm going to start to put that in. Now my water line is going to end about right here. So kind of keep that in mind as you're putting this sky in, is we're not going to paint the entire thing, because we want to leave space for our water. So now I have this beautiful peachy color, and I want to introduce that bright deep yellow while it's wet right in there. And then I'm going to start to blend this out. Now remember, we don't want to go up too close to that purpley part, so I'm going to stop about right there. And then I'm going to softly blend it out over here. But remember, we want to keep this area lighter. Now if you I'm kind of getting some lines of where I stopped. That's okay, because we're going to make it seem like there's clouds and stuff in there. So if you get a little bit of line work here at the bottom, it's not a huge deal. Just try and make sure your horizon line is straight. Now I'm going to add some tiger orange to this bottom part here. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be my horizon right there. And this orange is going to blend up to this really deep yellow. then because that brush is bigger and I'm trying to blend into a shorter area, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush and blend that out. Okay, so this is our sky. Step one, we have a nice transition here from our purple to our pink to our yellow to our kind of darker orange. And we are gonna go back and put like our clouds and stuff on the top. So don't stress about that right now because we'll put that in. So we did step one.
Easy.
You guys did awesome, that's great. Now, this is our horizon line right here. And a horizon line, if you don't really know, and I think I have this correct. We'll see. So if I'm looking far away into a landscape, the ground is going to be coming this way, the sky is going to be coming this way, and then they will meet. It's where the ground and the sky meet together, and it's a point, and it's usually like eye level to where you're looking at. And then that way it changes depending on your perspective of the landscape you're looking at. Does that make sense? I think that's right, but let me check that. Okay. So I'm going to put in like a little bit because I want to give the sense that there's something in the distance. And this one kind of looks like a mountain from far away. This right side is kind of, is that a cloud? Is that a landscape? It's a little more ambiguous, which I'm okay with. You just want to give the viewer something to look at. You don't always have to be super detailed in what it is. So to get this color, which is kind of like this brownish color, I'm going to take my deep yellow and a little bit of my amethyst, because they're complementary colors, and I'm going to mix those together. I'm going to get this like funky brown color. Now if it's too green, throw some pink in there, and that pink is going to warm it up and turn it a more neutral brown. Or you can just use black, but sometimes I like mixing my darker colors because it just gives them some depth. And then I talk too much because this dried, but you want to put it in while it's wet. So I'm going to re-wet this area. And then along that bottom, I'm just going to put in this dark color. And it should just kind of blend out and bleed on its own. If it's not doing that, help it. Sometimes you do that, it just stays there and you're like, what am I doing wrong? Sometimes it just happens. So I'm just going to help the little fella out. And be like, come on, little guy. Blend out for me. So I'm just taking my round 6, kind of moving it up. And then by doing that, I kind of messed up my straight line on my horizon line. Don't get mad at yourself if that happens, because you could just move the line down. It's not a big deal. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take my orange and I'm just going to move the line down to reach the bottom of that. Yep. And if you want to go across the entire thing, you can. I'm going to just try and see if I can get it to blend out. Because the other thing with watercolor, sometimes when your paper warps, it's a little bit harder to get a straight line. So just be forgiving with yourself in this point. I just want a little bit more purple in there. And you can decide how dark you want this to be. Okay, now I'm going to put in my other. This one, it looks a little bit more like a mountain in the far distance. So I'm going to grab that kind of darkish color that I started with. This one I'm going to have kind of be taller. I put in that color. I'm just using water to blend it out. And you want it to naturally slope. But this is your painting. So if you want like more of a cliff, and it has a sharp angle where it's abrupt, do that. This is totally your thing, so you can make it however you want it to be. Don't feel like you have to follow me exactly. I'm going to put another layer of purple here in the corner because I want it to be really dark right at that corner.
I love that orange-yellow color.
Isn't it so good?
It really is.
It's so vibrant. And I haven't even said this. So February, we're doing sea creatures and tropical because I just want the warmth so bad. I'm so tired of being cold that when I painted this, I was just like, I just want to be on a beach or just where there's sun that warms me.
That's not in Missouri.
Yeah, pretty much. That's why we're doing this. I hope you guys are feeling like I am. Okay, so we kind of put in our horizon line right here. And now we are going to move on to our water and our clouds. But before I do that, I just want this to blend out more. I feel like this is really similar to this and that's bothering me. And this is what painting is about, you guys, just kind of adjusting to it. So I'm just like, I don't really like how defined this area is. So I'm just gonna take a damp brush and blend it out a little bit. There. And that way you're like, is that a faraway landscape? Is that just like funky coloring from the sky? Who knows? But I feel better about that. Okay, so now we're going to do the water. Now, whenever you're doing water with the sky, you just have to think of it as mirrored. So whatever colors are going on here in your sky, you kind of want to mirror them in your water. You do usually want to leave a really thin white line at the top because then that just shows the water line, because there's like that reflection line within water. And so we're gonna leave a really thin white line up there if we can. And then we're gonna try and mirror the colors that are going on. You can adjust the colors a little bit, like you can see here that in my water, I made it a little bit more pink than maybe the orange that was going on here. That's okay too. Just kind of be aware of those colors. Water is reflective, so whatever color the sky is, most likely that's going to show up in the water as well. So, but let's put the clouds in first before we put in our water, because that's going to kind of inform us a little bit of what our water sky is going to be. So, and these clouds are just kind of wispy clouds, like little, like I'm kind of here clouds. So I'm gonna do this using like a mixture of the pink and the deep yellow. So it's kind of like this really pretty peachy color. And I'm just using my round 6, and I'm just gonna start putting in some horizontal lines. Just like that, and then I'm gonna blend them out a little bit. Now these are just long, like kind of wispy clouds that are kind of there. They're not big puffy cumulus clouds. Is that the right thing?
That is.
Is it?
I think it is. The cumulus clouds are the fat ones.
Sweet. Okay.
Fun fact, real quick.
Yeah.
Military bases are famous for using a color called a cumulus cloud gray for all of their walls.
Really?
This is very depressing.
If you want a cloudy gray wall, here in the military where it's so like pressure and serious anyway, it's like, let's just paint all of the walls a really depressing color.
A depression color, yes.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so I'm still kind of using this pink color. I'm gonna bring it more over here, and you are gonna skip lines like I am. That's okay, it's not a big deal. Clouds sometimes are wispy, they come in and out. And then I just really like this pink color, and I kind of want to introduce it more kind of over here. So this is just pink that I'm using. And then as you get darker into the stronger orange, you are going to have to mix a darker color or a darker value for those clouds to show up against that strong background. So I'm just going to mix some orange and maybe a little bit of that purple in there just to turn it a slightly different color. You can maybe grab some pink. We just want it to be a different value so it shows up against the sky. So putting in these darker clouds here. And then when I get to this area, I'm gonna use just the yellow because we are kind of imagining that this is where the sun is going down right here. And usually wherever the sun is, there's like really strong reflections of yellow or that color, whatever color it is, there's like really strong reflections of that color on those clouds. So I'm gonna try and use just this yellow over here to do these clouds. And try and get them as, you don't want your clouds to be like, I mean you can, there are like crooked clouds, but I'm trying to keep mine pretty horizontal. But if yours don't turn out horizontal, don't stress, because clouds do all different kinds of things, so you have a little bit of freedom.
That was one of the childhood games, right? Look for the different shapes in clouds.
Yeah. Okay, so I have some stronger yellow over here where my sun would be. And then also I'm gonna take this yellow and I'm gonna just put it right on the top of this kind of mountain that we have over here, because the same thing, wherever the sun is kind of showing brightly, it's gonna reflect on what's around it. So I'm gonna do this like thin layer of yellow and do some yellow clouds over here, because this is where the sun is strongest. And I just want to do more of a pink on this right hand side. Yeah, that looks good. And remember, this is your painting. If you want to do big puffy clouds, you can totally do that. If you have white paint, it might be hard to do it, big puffy clouds layered on top of this, because you want part of them to be white. So if you have white paint, you can try and do that. And watercolor in itself has really interesting textures when you do layers of water and color. So naturally, they're gonna kind of create these different textures within those clouds, and you just gotta accept those and embrace them. Like if you look at my example here, this kind of hard line right here, this texture that's going on here, this right here, all accidental elements, but they totally go with that kind of cloud feeling. So let go of control a little bit and let them kind of do their thing, and they're going to come up with some pretty cool stuff. I'm leaning back because sometimes water puts a glare on the paper and you got to kind of see what you're doing. And I don't like to say like one cloud upper right, another cloud lower left. You know what I mean? It's like you're painting. You can decide where you want those clouds to be. Totally up to you. Have fun with it. And don't be intimidated about making a mistake. First of all, everybody makes a mistake. It's going to happen. So just embrace it now. And secondly, it's just a piece of paper. So if you do make a mistake, rip it off the table, throw it away, do another one. I do it all the time.
Run it again.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I do want a little bit more yellow over here though.
I don't know if it's because I'm really hungry or the way you were saying mistake, but every time you said mistake, I thought just steak.
Steak. If you could just like put a steak right here and just be like,
I'll point
just be like, mistake, steak. Is anyone else hungry like Keenan? It's lunchtime here.
I'll do that.
Okay, that would be funny. Okay, so we put in our clouds. We're gonna move to our water. Now our water is gonna be super similar to how we do our sky. We're gonna work quickly and we're gonna work while it's wet. So I'm gonna switch back over to my larger brush. If you don't have that, you wanna use your 6, feel free to. And actually, if you feel like, because how do I say this? When you use larger brushes, you kind of lose control a little bit because they're so big. So if that is stressing you out, or if you do not like that, then use a smaller brush. Yes, Keenan.
Have you ever seen Bob Ross use a 2-inch brush? He does not lose control.
Okay, well, I don't think we can compare ourselves to Bob Ross here.
Not
Okay,
at all,
that
but
guy
that
is
was
a
my first
master. Okay, so I'm just gonna pick up some water. I have a more cleaner cup of water that I'm pulling water from. This is pretty orange, so if I laid it down, it's gonna have like a yellow tint, which isn't the worst thing because our sky is yellow, but I'm gonna try and get a cleaner color. I'm gonna put my water down and I'm gonna try and leave a really thin white line right where it's meeting the sky. Okay, there was paint right there, but that's okay, I'm just gonna blend it out. And I really like this pinky color that I got while mixing the orange and the deep yellow and the pink together. So I'm gonna go with that. Now because we want the top part to be a lighter value. And then as you're gonna go down in the water, it's gonna turn into a darker value. And that's how we actually communicate space or depth in a landscape, because sometimes if you look at the sky or if you look at a field of grass or anything that's vast, the one way we can communicate that it is vast and it keeps on going is to slightly change the values as we go. So we want the top part of our water to be a lighter value, and then as it's gonna go down, it's gonna get darker. If I were to color this all one value, if I took this kind of medium pink and I did that across the entire watered portion, my water is going to look totally flat. So in order for us to communicate that it keeps on going, there is space there, we have to change the values. Now it's okay if it gets a little bit streaky, kind of like here, because one, water has waves, so there are going to be some little lines of waves in there. And also we have clouds reflecting off it too, so we would have different colors in there. I'm going to introduce a little bit more yellow kind of on this bottom corner.
Had a little bubble there.
Yeah, I do have a little wave coming because I'm adding so much water to this.
I meant in your voice.
Oh, do I?
You had a little bubble, like your voice completely changed.
Did it? Sorry, my frog voice.
Who was that?
Sorry about that. Okay, and then I'm going to use my round 2 while it's still kind of wet. And I'm going to grab a slightly darker color. So I'm going to go for maybe like that same pink, but add a little bit of orange to it to get a darker color. And I'm going to just do some long, thin kind of wave lines. Try and keep them horizontal if you can. Sometimes you can't. And if that happens, you can just try and blend them out. But we just want to give the hint that there's some movement to this water, that it's not totally still. So we're putting in little wave lines, just a hint. You don't want to go across the entire part of your water and put in these lines because it will also flatten it. If you want texture and things to stand out, then you just have to envision, like, I don't know how to explain it. You can see those things depending on how the light hits it. The light can't hit everything the same way at once, so it's like, oh, a good example is a spider web. You don't see the entire spider web usually. It's usually how the light is hitting it and you only see pieces. It's the same thing with fur. It's the same thing with hair. It's the same thing with water waves. So don't go across the entire thing and do these like thin water wave lines, because that is going to flatten your water and kind of kill the illusion that we're trying to go for here. So I'm just going to do a little bit kind of here and there in the middle and maybe off to the right a little bit.
As a side note, I never see spider webs until I walk through them.
Keaton's like, I have no idea what you're talking about when you say spider webs and how you can see them. Keenan, you just got to watch the light. Maybe that's your problem.
I usually walk with my eyes closed, so that could be the problem.
No, that can't be it. That can't be it.
Oh.
Okay, and as you can see, I'm kind of leaving this left side a little bit bare. I'm not really going too crazy with color, and that's because I'm going to have a little black kind of foreground in right here, so I'm not stressing about it too much. If you do have color over there, it's really not a big deal because the color we're putting in is black, so it will cover whatever color you have there. However, in your own paintings, that's not always the case. So in watercolor, you just have to remember it's transparent. So if I was trying to put in yellow sand over here and I made this entire thing dark pink, it would be really hard to cover that pink up with yellow or brown. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay, and I'm actually going to introduce a little bit of yellow over here. I'm going to grab some deep yellow and add some water to it. Just a soft yellow, kind of trying to go along with where that sun is shining the strongest, which would be right here. This is where it's setting. Okay. The other thing I want you to think about is the white line that we left. You don't want it to be so thick that it's distracting. Now, in some places I left it nice and thin, so then it's like, oh, that's right. But I feel like right here, right in that middle, that line is pretty thick, that it's making me look at it longer than I should. So if that's happening to you, just go in and try and put a light wash in and make that line a little bit thinner, so it's just not as obvious. I mean, and that's the biggest thing when you're painting something with art. It's like, where do I want my viewer's eye to look at the most, and where do I not want it to be distracted by? It's like this balance of like, what's the focus of this painting? Or do I keep them interested in it? Or are there some places that are distracting where they're not looking at the entire thing as a whole? So it's just pay attention to that as you're painting. And that just takes practice. The more you paint, the more you'll realize what I'm even talking about. And another way to help that is to take your painting and put it across the room from you and look at it from far away. Because sometimes when you're like this far away from it, you can't see the thing as a whole. Okay, that is our water. We finished step 3. You guys are doing awesome.
It looks so good.
Okay, now we're gonna move on to step 4, which is we are going to do the palm tree leaves and the land. I'm gonna wait to do the land a little bit because I wanna make sure my water is totally dry before I try and put in like a sharp. If I try to put in black right now, it would bleed out because it's kind of wet. So wherever you're putting anything in, you just wanna make sure it's dry. Now, the other thing I want you to keep in mind is like, once you put something on top, once I put these palm leaves in, I can't adjust the sky anymore. Because if I try to like blend something out, that black would smear everywhere, it would become a mess. So make sure the sky is where you want it before you add in your leaves. I feel pretty good about it. If anything, there is a pretty strong transition here, like a hard line right here. So I'm gonna see if I can help that smooth out a little bit more. I'm just gonna grab a little bit of pink and just right here, smooth that out. And if you got to do another layer, that's okay. Also, skies are super interesting and they change all of the time and they're all different. Sometimes there are hard lines in colors. Sometimes the transition is kind of abrupt. So don't stress if one part of your painting has an abrupt transition, because sometimes that's how we see things also. Yeah, that feels much better to me in terms of the transition. Do you agree, Keenan?
I do agree.
Fabulous. The only bummer is now we have to wait for that to totally dry before we can put in our leaves.
I was just thinking that.
But that's good because I wanted to talk about the leaves for a bit. So when you do these leaves, or these palm tree palms, palm leaves? Are they?
Palm tree leaves?
I don't know.
We know too little about too many things.
It's one thing I've learned, how I know nothing. Painting, recording myself talk. Okay, so there's 2 things I want you to keep in mind when you're painting things like trees or just things that are kind of branching out in the sky. Is I want you to think about the actual structure of what you're painting, and then also gravity. Now what I mean by that is when you're painting a tree silhouette and you're painting twigs or leaves or like the trunk, and if you think of those things by themselves, they're kind of rigid. They're rigid and they're strong, so they are going to stick out totally straight, right? When you do like branches, that kind of thing. But when you do like palm leaves, the leaves themselves are really like, they don't have a really strong structure. They're not very strong, they're kind of wispy. So because of that, they are going to give way to gravity. So when you do your palm leaves, and this is what your brain is going to tell you to do, because when our brain tells us to draw something, we always think of it totally flat and looking over it. So when you think of palm leaves, you're probably going to be like, right? Palm leaf. However, this palm leaf is hanging, and because of gravity, all of those single little leaves are going to kind of hang down. They're not going to stick straight out from the main stem right here. So see how they kind of have that movement where they hang down? That's what I want you guys to keep in mind. I don't want you to do And I'm gonna use a round 2 for this because I'm gonna get a thinner line. If you have a liner brush, that would be really helpful also. But you're not gonna do your like thin stem and then have your palm leaves all stick straight out, because that is not following the rules of gravity, which is what we have to follow when you're painting natural scenes. So I want you to keep that in mind. Think of, if you were to picture those palm leaves in your head, think of how they would hang down and that kind of movement. Okay? The other thing I want you to pay attention to is, because they're hanging down, they're going to be gathered in some areas. So you'll see right here I have really thick, and that's because that's where all of those palm leaves gather together and hang together, so they create a thicker line, and then they thin out at the bottom where those individual pieces stick out. So
and it'll be okay if they kind of clump.
Yeah, we kind of want them to clump. That's what's going on right here and right here. This one's not clumping as much, but they're clumping together because they're all having that same kind of like hang. They all hang the same way.
Chilling.
Yeah. So and this is true for kind of anything that you're painting. It's true for like trees and lemon trees and those kinds of things. You have to think of the structure of what you're painting, and if gravity affects it to where it's going to have a different angle than if it's totally flat.
I never would have thought of that.
Well, I'm here for you. I'm here to point those things out to you. Do you know what's so funny? You can cut this if it's so long. But the first time I did a tree silhouette and Brock was painting. Okay, because here's the thing. I feel like when we say these things out loud, we're like, no, I totally know that. That's so obvious. But when you actually go to draw it, you don't pay attention to those things.
Yeah.
So I was like, Brock, when you paint a tree, the tree gets thinner as it goes out. So when you add new branches, you have to make sure it's thicker at the base and then thins out. And I was like, does that make sense? He's like, yeah, I've seen a tree before. And I just want to be like, I'm sorry. You come and paint this tree, and I guarantee you that your branches would be either the same or get thicker as they go out instead of thinner. Brock, acting like he knows all the things.
Because he wears an apron one time.
Because he wears an apron one time. Listen, do I wear an apron now too to protect my clothes? Yes. Was that a good idea from Brock? Yes.
Touche, Brock.
Touche, Brock.
I might keep that.
Okay. So I'm getting my black here. Now my water is more dry than my sky, I think. So I'm going to put in my little island foreground first. You can make this go as far out, or you don't even have to have it there if you don't want. I'm just going to start on the up side, and it's going to just go down. And you can make it stick out as much as you want. And then you fill it in with black. Now, you might have to do a couple layers with the black to get that nice dark color. Sometimes when it's really wet and you keep on layering black, it will not get darker. And that's just because it's wet. So you might have to just let it dry and do another layer to darken that up. And that is okay. Ooh, that one got really long, but I'm fine with it. If you want to kind of lightly draw yours in before you commit, you can do that. Okay, there's my little island foreground thing. And now I'm going to do my palm leaves. Now you might have noticed that I'm not doing the entire palm leaf tree, I'm just doing a little bit. And that is because, how do I say this? Like everybody has seen that silhouette with the palm trees, usually two, sticking out from an island, that kind of thing. And I want you guys to focus on ways that you can switch up the composition to make it more unique and make it more for you. So like we've seen this like two palm leaf in the sunset silhouette a billion times everywhere. And you can paint that and there's nothing wrong with it, but if you want to switch it up, if you want to make it yours, just switch the composition a little bit. So I just moved the palm trees out and only did a tease of the palm leaves, and this already is more unique to what you might see as a computer screensaver or something like that. So don't be afraid to switch up the what?
That'd be a good computer screensaver.
So don't be afraid to switch up the composition or to crop something in to give it more interest. This is where you kind of have fun as an artist and use your eye to see like, how can I change this up so it's not something that people see all the time, every day. So that's why I switched it up. But it's your painting. You can do whatever you want. If you like the whole palm trees, and put them in. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, so I'm gonna start with my leaves. It's pretty dry now. Now the first palm leaf that I'm putting in, we're kind of looking at it from the side. So it's not going to be this with branches on either side. It's hanging down, and since we're looking at it from the side, it's just gonna have, you're just gonna see one side of it pretty much. Like so. So it's turned. We're changing our perspective of that leaf because it's from the side and not flat. So I'm going to start here, and I'm just using my round 2 to get a nice thin line, and I'm just going to kind of start maybe an inch down and have it slightly kind of curve out. Now the stem itself is also following that rule of it's not going to stick straight out because palm leaves have that curve to them. So it's going to be a soft curve, and then my little leaves. And this is how I painted them. This is the way that was easier for me, is I did the chunks. So here are my chunks kind of coming off. And then they're gonna kind of like turn into the vein right here. And then I'm gonna take my 2 and then do the, sorry, am I getting in the way of that camera by moving my whole body?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm gonna do thinner lines coming out from these chunks. And you just have to keep in mind that for thin lines, it's just light pressure. Now that one got a little bit thick. That's okay. Some of them are gonna get funky. Don't let that stop you, because when we have a huge pile over here, nobody's gonna pay attention to that one funky little thick line. So just keep on going. Don't let that stop you. And then I'm going to do smaller individual lines kind of connecting these chunks to the main stem, like so. And then you can kind of see, you're going to kind of see the other side of the palm leaf, but it's just going to be like a little hint. Like, yes, there is another side to this. We're only seeing a tiny, tiny portion of it. But they're all kind of following that kind of feel of it hanging kind of down. Okay, so there's my first palm leaf tree. Palm? Just a palm?
I think we were over this once.
Gosh, I felt like I did such a good job with the octopus.
You did?
Looking up what these things were. But then it's so funny because I'm like, well, it's a palm tree. I don't need to look up what that is. I know what that is.
That's what I was just going to say.
Okay. So this one, because it's on a side, we're really only seeing one side. Now the second one we're going to do, this main big one, that one is going to appear more flat to us. It's a different perspective. And so we're going to be able to see both sides. So I'm going to put in the main stem first, and it's going to kind of follow that same kind of falling down because that gravity is pushing that light, that light stem in a direction. So it's going to be like this. Okay, so here's my stem. I missed a section in the middle. Don't stress. I do that all the time. And I'm going to start with putting in my chunks on the left-hand side. So I'm using my 2 and I'm putting in my chunky parts. This is where the leaves are all running together, and because it's like hair, it's like when all the individual pieces run together, you get chunks and it appears thicker. So that's what we're putting in right here, is these chunks of them layering on top of each other. And And then when we get to the top part, because there's little of them, they don't have a lot of room to layer, you're not gonna have that thick chunk on the top. That's when they're gonna kind of like branch out. And if you need to practice doing these thin lines on your scratch paper, feel free to. You're basically just going to be like light pressure, and you kind of like want to wisp away because you want them, you don't want a perfectly thick, same even line. You know, same with trees and trunks, the leaves are going to start out thicker and then get more narrow as they go. So you kind of want to like wisp it away. So if you got to practice that a couple of times, do that.
Is there any particular sound that would go with the wisping?
Oh, wisp. Wisp,
Oh,
wisp,
that's nice.
wisp, wisp, wisp. Okay, and then the bottom parts, we're going to see those thin lines. So that's what that practicing is for. It's just these lines that we're seeing wisp out. And I know that you're looking at this right now and thinking, this looks really bad. Just stick with it, you guys. Don't stop halfway through. Paintings usually don't look good until the very end anyway. So don't give up on me now. So I'm wisping out. I don't know why I thought that was funny. Wisping out. Ugh. It's okay if they overlap. We want them to overlap. That's how we would see them in real life, is them overlapping with the other palm sections, palm leaf. Did you by chance go? Is it just a palm leaf? Okay, now we're going to connect these bigger chunks to the main stem, and I'm just gonna do, it's the same, almost the same idea as like just having these edges, is I'm just gonna like do thin little connections here and there to this main stem. Because you have to think like they are separated from where they come out from the stem, but then they were going to clump together, and then we would see the thin ends again. So it's like thin, thick, and thin. And instead of trying to paint each one of those individually, of doing like, you know, that same brush stroke, which I think is a little bit harder, is I just switched it up. And this is how I painted it in here, is I did the chunks first and then the edges and then where they connect to the stem. Okay, now that's looking pretty good. If there's anything I would suggest is I feel like I left a little more kind of white space in between these chunks. This one seems pretty full all the way across. So kind of pay attention to that. I'll try and do that in that next one where I leave some wider spaces in between because the chunks get kind of funky and there is light that kind of shows through some of those spaces. So I'm going to go ahead and do the chunks on this side. And I'm going to do this kind of mark and see how I'm going to get, and I'm going to get an uneven edge and I might get some white spaces in between. And then I'm going to do the edges themselves. So it's just little wisps, like wisp. Now you'll notice I'm not going at them straight out. They're hanging, so they're kind of following that same curved line where they kind of hang down. And then when we get to the top here, because the tree is kind of turning away from us, we wouldn't necessarily see the edges down here like we would up here. The top is going to stay a little bit more chunked. Then I'm going to have this kind of meet my stem. Just do these little, and not every chunk has to match up with the stem. And then I'm going to do a couple more coming right from the top here. And you know, this is your painting. Adjust it as you go if you don't think something looks right. Like for me, I feel like there's maybe too much space in between these chunks and this stem. So I'm just gonna go in between on a couple of them and fill that in just a little bit more. That feels better to me. Don't be afraid to take a chance, because that's how we learn. Okay, I feel pretty good about that. Now I'm gonna do another one, and this one is just like as if like the top one that's kind of hanging out, so you're only seeing the very tip of it. So I'm gonna do the main stem here, kind of coming out. And then this one is gonna be a little bit more flat. This one, just because of how it would be turned, this one we are gonna see both sides, and it's not gonna chunk up as much because one, we're only seeing like the tip, and two, it's kind of turned a little bit more flat. So these are just kind of, you're just wisping away on these ones. Just wisp, 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 wisp. Okay. Okay, that feels pretty darn good. And then as always, before you untape and move on and do all of that stuff, just take a look at it. See, is there any other adjustments I really need to make? Is there anything that's bothering me? And are the things that are bothering me really things that I need to worry about? Like, you might be bothered by this if this was yours, this kind of watermark that happened here. For me, I love this texture. Totally accidental. I didn't mean to do it, but I think it gives interest, and I don't think it takes away from the painting at all. So I'm gonna leave that there. I do wanna, for me, I wanna put a little more thin connectors on this right-hand side. It was looking a little too bare. And maybe do another layer of black on this first one to kind of darken up some areas. Okay, yes. Yeah, that feels good. Haha. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to remove tape. If this was mine, I might let it dry a little bit before I do this, or do another layer right here. But when you remove tape, you want to go pull away from the painting. So I'm not going to start on this side. I'm going to start on the side where the tape is actually on the paper, and I'm going to be pulling away, and you're going to do it slowly and gently. Because if I were to take this piece of tape and just rip it really quick off from this side, it's more likely to grab the fibers of the paper and rip the paper itself. Even though this is painter's tape, it can still do that. So you're just going to slowly and gently and softly pull away from the paper. Look at that nice clean edge.
I love that crisp edge.
Yes, isn't it nice?
Ah.
Okay, same thing. I'm gonna start from the inside, pull away, slowly, softly, gently. What are some
Lovingly.
other? Lovingly. Okay. Okay, but if this is not the most satisfying thing.
Also, the sound is really great.
It's just like, my black bled a little, but that's okay. Yes. Last one. why I'm pulling away from it. Oh, I got my reference photo. Okay, we're good. Okay, look at that nice clean white border.
That is nice.
So good. This painting is super fun. We transition in colors. We do wet on dry. We do wet on wet. We do a lot of fun techniques. Everybody's is gonna look so different. I can't wait to see what yours looks like. If you need a reminder of how we do color blending, I believe we covered that in the techniques video. So if you need to go, we have some videos on our YouTube channel called the Beginner Series. Take a look through those, get yourself familiar with colors and how to transition through them if you're not yet comfortable doing this. And share your work. I know it's so scary, but if we put ourselves out there, it gives other people the courage to try it. It makes them want to do it too. And I think that even if you have no intention of being a professional artist, creativity is so good for us. It's so good for our mental health. It just makes our lives richer and better. So I encourage all of you to do this. Share your work. If you put it on Instagram, you can tag us in it. Let's go make art, or hashtag let's make art, and we'll take a look at it. Facebook, it's the same. And we have this wonderful Facebook community called Let's Make Art Together. It's huge now. There's like over 7,000 people. You guys are awesome. And it's a space where I feel like it's safe. Like everybody understands that it's not here where you're not posting your work because you think it's the best in the world. It's not, you don't do it to compare with what you're painting. Don't look at it like, look how good that is, I don't belong here. Everybody is on a different journey. We celebrate every single stage. And the reason why it's good to look at other people's work is because it can teach you things. You can be like, whoa, I really liked how that person transitioned from this color, or I really liked those textures, or how did they do that? It's just another way to learn. So don't look at it as a competition, look at it as just a way to grow.
It's a really supportive group.
Super supportive. So if you're not comfortable posting it on your personal feeds, you can share it there. And it's filled with really great people, and I love it very much. I appreciate all of those people. So you guys are awesome. Thank you for painting me. And that's it. Okay, bye. Did I say thank you for painting me?
You did.
Did you stop recording? Thank you for painting with me. Sorry.
I'm gonna keep that one with me.
Please. Okay, bye.